On the last Friday of August, the fairgrounds outside Newton, Kansas, looked as if somebody had shaken a toy town and dropped it in the dust. Trucks were parked along the fence. Strings of colored bulbs hung over the midway. A brass band was warming up near the pie tent, and the air smelled like fried dough, hot oil, hay, and rain that had not yet fallen. Vera McKinney stood by the ticket booth with a roll of blue tickets in one hand and a paper fan in the other. She was 17, skinny as a fence rail, with hair the color of wet wheat. She had spent the afternoon helping at the 4-hour building, and now she was supposed to sell the first batch of Moonlight Night tickets. Tonight mattered. The fair board had promised the school that all the money from rides and games would go into a coffee can on the school board table. The old red brick schoolhouse had a roof that leaked like a sieve. If they did not fix it before winter, the third-grade room would fill with buckets again. Mrs. Ruth Jensen, who kept the money, had said it plain at the meeting the week before. No money, no roof. No roof, no dry school. That was why nobody wanted trouble tonight. At the far end of the midway stood the oldest ride on the grounds, a tall Ferris wheel with chipped red paint and pale white arms. The boys from the paper called it the Moon-Pull Ferris Wheel because on clear nights its metal shone like a silver spiderweb in the dark. It was the biggest moneymaker the fair had. Kids begged for it. Parents paid for it. Even the county men who said they were too old to ride still came to stare up at it with their hands on their hats. Vera heard the first bad sound just as the sky turned the color of a bruised plum. Clank. It was soft, but she heard it. She had grown up around loose gates, broken tractor parts, and barn doors that never shut right. A sound like that meant a part was working too hard. She looked at the wheel. It was sitting still, but one side seemed a little lower than the other. Joe Haskins, who ran the ride, leaned out of the little control box at the base. He was a square-shouldered man with a red neck and grease on his hands. He froze when he heard it too. "Hear that?" he called. Vera nodded. It sounded like a pan falling down a well. Joe went pale. He walked around the base of the wheel, bent down, and touched the main support with his thumb. Then he stood up fast. "Well, that ain't good," he muttered. A second sound came from the wheel. This one was a low groan, deep in the metal. Joe pointed at a shiny place near the center. "That bolt is backing out, and I don't like that wobble one bit." Vera stepped closer. She did not touch the ride. She only looked. She could see it now. One of the big nuts near the hub was missing. Another one was crooked. A brace had a crack in it, small but real. The wheel was not falling yet, but it was tired. And the storm wind, coming in from the west, was about to make it worse. Across the fairgrounds, the band stopped tuning. A gust pushed dust across the midway. One little girl grabbed her mother's skirt. Mrs. Jensen hurried over with a tin box under her arm. The box was full of ride money already, but not enough. Not nearly enough. "Is it bad?" she asked. Joe rubbed the back of his neck. "Bad enough that I don't want riders on it till I check every bolt." "Check it now," said Mrs. Jensen. Joe looked up at the sky. The cloud bank was rolling in fast. Thunder muttered far away. "If I stop the wheel, I stop the line. If I stop the line, I stop the night." That was the problem. The fair had only a few hours to make its money. If the wheel shut down, the crowd would thin out. No crowd meant no ticket sales. No ticket sales meant no roof repair. Vera crossed her arms. How long have you known it was loose? Joe gave her a look. Long enough to know I wish I had not known it at all. The wind pushed again. The wheel gave a tiny shiver. Vera stared up at it. She had climbed silos, haystacks, and one barn roof her cousin had dared her to cross. She did not like heights, but she liked broken things even less. A loose bolt was a small thing until it was not. "Can you fix it from the ground?" she asked. Joe gave a short laugh with no joy in it. "Not with this wind. I'd need a jack, a long wrench, 3 strong men, and a prayer." "I can get the wrench," Vera said. Mrs. Jensen shook her head at once. "No, Vera. Not you. And why not me?" "Because the wheel is high as a grain elevator. So is the water tower, and I climbed that old ladder to get a cat down last spring." Joe pointed a finger at her. "This is not a cat. This is 20 tons of steel and wood." Vera looked from Joe to Mrs. Jensen and then back to the wheel. The first fat drops of rain hit the dust by her shoe. "Then it needs someone small enough to get where the big men can't," she said. "You are talking nonsense," said Mrs. Jensen. "Maybe," Vera said. "But I'm also talking about the school roof." That quieted them both. A distant flash lit the clouds. The whole fairground seemed to hold its breath. Joe wiped his face with his sleeve. "If I let you go up there and you slip, I will never hear the end of it." "You won't hear the end of it if the wheel falls either," Vera said. He closed his eyes for 1 second. Then he opened them and called, "Earl, bring the ladder. And the toolbox. And if we live through this, I'm taking up quilting." Earl Grady, the tractor man, came running from the service yard with a long ladder on his shoulder and a jaw set hard. 2 boys behind him carried a jack and a bucket of tools. The crowd had started to gather now. People always came closer when something looked dangerous. That was the way of a fair. Earl set the ladder against the wheel tower. "If you go up there, you hold on with both hands," he told Vera. "I planned to," she said. He gave her a rough grin. "Smart answer." Joe handed her the big wrench and a flashlight wrapped in a rag. "You see that missing bolt hole, you holler? Don't be a hero up there. And..." Vera took the wrench and clipped a short rope around her waist. Joe tied the other end to the base of the tower. "That rope won't stop a fall," she said. "No," Joe said. "But it'll make me feel less sick." Vera climbed. The first ladder rungs were dry. The second set were slick with old grease. The wind grew stronger with every step. The midway below looked smaller and smaller. Kids near the candy stand pointed up at her. The band had stopped playing. Even the pie tent went quiet. At the top of the tower, the metal frame shook under her boots. She crouched low and crawled onto the narrow walkway that ran behind the wheel's center. Rain tapped on the iron above her head. The smell of wet dust came up from the ground. Then she saw the real trouble. One of the main collars around the axle had shifted 1/2 inch. That tiny gap made the whole wheel lean. A bolt was missing. Another was bent at an ugly angle. If the wheel turned hard, one more time, the hole would tear wider. Vera swallowed. Below her, the crowd looked like a patchwork quilt of hats and umbrellas. Joe and Earl stood at the base, necks bent back, waiting. Far off, lightning flashed again. The wheel gave a long, tired groan. "Joe!" Vera shouted. The collars slipped. "We need the holes lined up before it moves again." "Can you reach it?" he yelled back. "I can reach it if the wheel stays still." That was the hard part. The storm wind kept pushing at the big flat side of the ride. The wheel wanted to turn. It wanted to keep moving, even though it was not safe. Another gust hit. The whole frame leaned. Vera grabbed the rail with one hand and the flashlight with the other. She shone the light on the collar. The bolt hole was just a finger width off. She heard Joe below saying something to Earl. Then the tractor started. Earl had pulled the old green tractor into place beside the tower. He tied a chain from the rear hitch to the lower wheel frame. "Slow!" Joe yelled. Earl revved the engine once, then eased it forward. The chain went tight. The wheel moved a little, but not enough. Vera looked at the bolt hole and then at the sky. The clouds had split for 1 second. A pale moon showed through, round and bright, right above the wheel. That made her laugh once, sharp and short, because it looked as if the moon itself had come to watch. "Again!" she shouted. Joe yelled, "You sure?" "Just do it." Earl crept the tractor another foot. The chain pulled. The wheel gave a deep, heavy creak and turned a little more. Not enough. Vera made a quick choice. She clipped her rope tighter, set one boot on the narrow rim, and stood up. The wheel was so high that her stomach jumped, but she kept her eyes on the collar. Her boots were soaked now. Wind pushed at her skirt and hair. The moon slipped in and out behind the clouds like a flashlight under a blanket. Below her, Joe shouted, "Vera, get down." But she did not get down. She spread her arms for balance, took 3 careful steps along the narrow rim, and put her weight where the wheel was worst off. The old machine gave a long moan, then shifted just enough. For one crazy second, it felt as if the whole Ferris wheel floated between the wind and the moon. "Now!" Vera yelled. Joe shoved the wrench into the loose bolt hole from below with both hands braced on the frame. Earl eased the tractor forward, 1 more inch. The collar slipped into line. Vera jammed the big bolt through the opening and slapped the wrench onto it. She twisted hard. The metal bit caught and held. She hit the head of the bolt with the heel of her hand, then with the wrench again. The sound rang out, clear and bright. Clang! The wheel stopped wobbling. For a second, nobody moved. Then thunder cracked over the fairgrounds so loud that the pie tent flapped and a few kids screamed. Rain came down in full sheets, but the Ferris wheel stood straight. Joe let out a whoop so loud the band heard it from across the grounds. Earl slapped the tractor hood. Mrs. Jensen put both hands over her mouth and then started laughing and crying at the same time, which made Vera want to laugh too. "You did it!" Joe yelled up at her. Vera was still on the wheel, holding the rail and breathing hard. "I know," she said, and then because the whole fair was looking at her, she added, "Somebody better bring me a towel before I rust." That got a big laugh from the crowd. Joe shouted to the ticket booth, "Lights on. Open the line." The ride bulbs came on one by one, shining warm yellow through the rain. The wheel looked brand new for a moment, all silver and gold against the dark sky. People ran for cover, then turned right back around and lined up anyway. The storm made the fair look brave. The Ferris wheel made it look even braver. And when the first riders climbed in, the crowd cheered so hard that the band picked up again and played louder than before. Vera climbed down the ladder with wet hair, muddy shoes, and a grease streak across one cheek. A little boy in suspenders stared at her and said, Very serious. Did you really hold up that wheel? Vera took the rag Joe handed her and wiped her face. No, she said. The moon did half the work. I just gave it something to pull on. That line made the men laugh, but the people who were there kept telling the story a little bigger every time they told it. By the next week, some folks said Vera had walked around the wheel in the rain and balanced the whole ride with one hand. Others said she had tied the moon to the top of the tower. One old farmer swore the tractor engine had hummed in tune with the thunder because it was afraid of her. The truth was plenty good enough. The fair stayed open all night. The ticket box filled up. The pie auction went long. Kids rode the Moon-Pull Ferris Wheel until the clouds moved east and the moon came back out for real. By midnight, Mrs. Jensen had counted enough money for the school roof and then some. In October, when the shingles went on, the classrooms stayed dry. Years later, when people in Newton got to talking about the old fair, they still came back to that wet, windy night. They talked about the storm, the lights, the tractor, and the girl on the wheel with the wrench in her hand and the moon behind her. And every time, somebody always said the same thing. That was Vera McKinney. If the moon was pulling anything that night, it was pulling for her.